Afternoon. Well, I said I would do a stream today, although you have to excuse me, I'm really, really exhausted, so I don't know if I'm actually going to be able to collect my thoughts well enough to do it, but we'll see how we go. And to be honest, there's not a great deal to update on Bitcoin and everything else anyway. Everything's just kind of drifting around in a sideways pattern, which is not surprising, like as I said. So, to recap, Bitcoin's at monthly supply here. Um, had the first hit that rejected off this 5 day insider, then it's come up deeper inside a weekly, a little bit higher. There were various kind of tighter zones that I was looking at up here, and I think it swing failed an area I was looking for over here, but there was, I think, it's a very small trend line if you look at the lower time frames. Just a tiny trend line stops here, but didn't quite get to this 4 hour zone, which would have been the next zone of interest. Structurally, it's a bit awkward. We're bounded by this 12-hour demand at the base, and we're still holding above that. It did make a new 3 day, and then just by a tiny hair yesterday, a 5 day as well, demand in there. So it's holding those zones, um, but obviously isn't looking very strong. And one of the risks on this that while we have had a decent up move is when I go back and look at the consolidation we had here, where we had similar structures, and also not to mention like these. I think eventually we were in a 3 week supply at the highs, maybe over towards the end here. But they didn't even have significant supply on this to start with, whereas the current price has monthly. Um, we do tend to get these three pushes and then a bigger drop. And the other thing of note is that most of these drops happen Monday, Tuesday. So, and they don't give retest. So, in the Bulls' favour, we do have CME gap left above. However, in the Bears' favour, and then in fact, in all these cases, the CME gaps got filled on the Monday candle, whereas in our current situation, it didn't. But yeah, so the drop from the Monday, Tuesday here just didn't retrace and dropped. Same here. I believe the same here. Yeah, so Monday, Tuesday, maybe back over here. I mean, like it could be a little bit of confirmation bias. It's not all of them. Monday, Tuesday, like it had already dropped here on the Friday, and then Monday, Tuesday started to drop up here. So, I'm just looking at the kind of highs over here because obviously this was the consolidation we had previously, and potentially we're going to get a similar type consolidation here. I mean, I have seen other people comparing back to 2021, which is fair to some extent. We could have some sort of structure like this where we're in this type of area and we get the retest. It's possible, but at least also the other thing with this structure is this had hit a decent demand at the base, whereas I'm not overly comfortable with where this current structure has hit at the base, being not even retesting that previous high there, just above. I mean, it is in I think, a 12-hour demand there, which is why I did have that original entry there, but I'd be more comfortable if this had come a little bit lower. Um, but yeah, so I just said to the group, there were a lot of other things as well. The totals, particularly total three, and others where I was looking at didn't look overly good on the close on Sunday. And the majors the same. And then from a confidence perspective, it was looking to me like we were going to get a bit of a down week this week, or at least the first few days. So we've had that obviously for yesterday, and then now we need to see. But I have said, don't be overly excited about getting longs in here, or even, if we come down and close this gap, this was for a swing failure entry. If it takes out the range, closes the lower gap and bounces. But wait for confirmation on that. And then also, as I've said, while I've alerted longs for possibly, this entry was halfway decent, but from a fib perspective, it's just below the 61.8 and taking out the lows of this little consolidation here. But then, as if you remember, if you watched my last stream, I had a pattern which I've seen and drawn previously many times, and it's gone obviously a little bit higher than when I drew this originally. But when we get this move up consolidation triangle, quite often we can distribute and then fall straight back through that triangle. So therefore, that's why I'm not overly confident with looking for longs at 85k on top of this zone. Because I think it's too common that, particularly if we have a tight consolidation like that hasn't taken stops, that we then run back through and take all those. And even then, we may or may not stop. So while I've got that as a possible swing failure, taking the lows of the consolidation, it's a big kind of a zone. It's not very clean. There's an 8 hour untested at the bottom, and as I've said, we're not in a decent zone at the low, in my opinion. So, there's obviously if this does play out the bear scenario, we could well get something like this and not stop here for where people were going to be looking for longs. So just be a bit conscious of that. And then similar, as I've kind of commented about this before, but again, like this is that similar triangle structure that I just talked about with the distribution and then running straight through. In this case, obviously it would have given you scalps through that area. So for me, and then it's worth alerting because this is a 12-hour chart, so these could give you, a couple of days of a long scalp. But yeah, just be conscious then if you do enter long scalps here, A, of that we might come down and take out the low, or take out the lows of that consolidation, and B, that they're scalps. And if you've got decent supply, you should look for short entries. Um, yeah, so that's that. So yeah, like I say, nothing really new there. The difficulty I had is where to look for entries. So I haven't been on top of this for the last few days, and it's just had this sort of slow grind down. I don't really like weak MPA, it's had this slow grind down. So if you start looking at the lower time frames, this could, if it does want to bounce, it could very easily squeeze through that area. And then the CME close, you can obviously see, is like virtually at the top of that consolidation. So I have set an alert for up here, but noting that at this point in time, I think there's maybe an hourly. What have I got there? It's a 1 hour supply up the top here. The alert's a little bit before the zone, so the zone will be higher. But yeah, that just to be conscious, that if we hold here, and or even if we swing fail the low and come back into range, that then this is necessarily going to be a highly probable short. And even as it stands, if we bounce here and go back up there, it's not necessarily a highly probable short, because we still haven't broken structure. Um, so yeah, just be aware of that. And also, so the other thing is on the indices. So which again just throws it off a little bit, is all the indices bounced yesterday. I've left all the gaps in so you can see, but I can delete them now. But you can see here, S&P, for example, the gap was up the top there. And when they bounced yesterday for the day, they then came back up. So much like Ether was a bit stronger, they came back up, closed the gaps, and now have dropped off and now have made 12-hour supplies. Um, and yeah, I think virtually all of them except the Aussie. But Aussie has a tendency to not fill gaps anyway, so I don't really consider that particularly reliable. But all of the gaps that they did have been filled. Yeah, even Russell has a wick into that area, and they've all the indices now have a 12-hour supply. That again, they're not bearish. They were like in broadly in zones I was looking for shorts in. So you can see the Dow, J225, FTSE, Russell, and EU all had hit short entries for me, but they're not all like, so these were daily zones on a couple of them, so they're not necessarily highly probable short entries. S&P and so Nasdaq had already hit the zone, so I didn't re-alert it. So it's obviously come high in that zone. S&P similarly, I did alert for a short off the daily. It was a kind of aggressive short, and in fact still is in the zone. Although I've deleted the zone now, it did have a wick down, but didn't come back down to demand, and now it's just pushed higher in the zone. So arguably this is still in the zone, the originally alerted zone, and has a weekly 3-day supply in there. But they all have a daily demand. So while then we're getting a down day, Nasdaq you can see is now just testing that daily demand. Now it could just go back up and take out the high at this point. Still looking at whether these are going to enter a downtrend or not. Bitcoin is following them a bit less well than it has previously, so maybe that's less of an issue for Bitcoin. But yeah, again, that CME gap yesterday, I guess the weakness of the bounce that we had yesterday on Bitcoin, even compared to Ether, was pretty poor. On the other sort of confluences, so the Korea pair, for example, also it created a 2-day supply. Whereas, so if I show you the 2-day, you can see that the US dollar pair is still in what was 2-day demand, whereas Korea closed very slightly below and then rejected off the level to drop lower and entirely take out. At that point, it would have been in a just missed it would have been in a day, still in the 2-day demand, but have just flipped the candle to supply. And then if you get that immediate rejection, which in this case it did, is now taken out in 2-day demand entirely. Whereas in contrast, the US dollar pair is still in 2-day demand and with the new 3-day. So it's a bit difficult. It's not clean. And similarly, CME is also in a 2-day demand. But again, not the cleanest or nicest one. And with that, you can see here with those two gaps. So we've got the gap below and we've got the gap above now. US dollar dominance also was more aligned with Korea. So while the US dollar Bitcoin pair is messing around and not looking very clear. Again, the confluence is better on these other pairs. So in the bigger picture on this, we do have a break of trend. But what I always said is I wanted to see the retests here because, again, at the moment we can potentially still be in an uptrend. We can still be sort of, we've just corrected. Yes, we've taken out the last swing low, but it's not significantly taken out, and it's only been on a bunch of wicks below that level. So this could still be arguably in a bullish structure. Difficult again because it's in a 2-month supply. But, the possibility of it going up there is still there off the double bottom. But at a minimum, I wanted to see a retest of a 4-day supply in here or the daily at the top. And again, similar to these structures over here that we had. So, again, we could still be in just this normal uptrend. Oops. I'm going to draw this that well. It's a weaker last wave, but then we need to see the test here. So in this case, it ended up testing with a lower high, dropped down, similar here, then a lower high, and then we started to fall off. So again, here, we're potentially at this point in time, are we going to see a lower high in here before, again, a bigger drop? But we need to see the test to know that. So I wasn't comfortable, and I kind of said, there's way better things to trade than Bitcoin. Since Bitcoin's had the pump up to 95, 96K, I think it's not reliable taking longs in there. And then there's pros and cons on taking shorts, but shorts would be my preference because we're in supply, so that's why I look to short. That would be, but again, only on the setup. When you have a strong move up like you have on Bitcoin, you want the setup to support the move. And so what we had on US dollar dominance is it made a 2-day demand, and it's now it's just tapped into that and is coming off that. Again, it's still a little bit messy like Bitcoin, but a little bit cleaner. It looks clear. It looks much more like this is going to break out, but still, it's still on the downside of this. It's still trapped below this weekly level. But yeah, so really in the next, if not today, maximum tomorrow, I want to see this pushing up, and then what we're going to get on where Bitcoin's going to be when we hit to these two levels. And I think these are going to reasonably well align with those two zones that I've talked about. So not the immediate one. That would kind of probably be on this 12-hour here, or floating. It's just going to be a floating in the middle of nowhere type move for US dollar dominance. So I don't love that zone. Then this one down here is potentially going to align reasonably well with this first zone on US dollar dominance, and then the second one on the higher zone on US dollar dominance. So again, I do, just trade what you see. My bias remains more for the short side on Bitcoin, and nothing to say otherwise. And there's nothing really, it's not clean enough for me to take longs in here. Unless I see some decent structure form. If this, suddenly gets some strength and closes, above here, leaving an 8-hour demand or a 12-hour demand below, or even a 4-hour, then by all means, you can look for longs on that. But at the moment, based just on what it's doing off this 3-day demand, I'm not confident. And you can see, so I'll go to my lower time frame chart. So it's the same that I've just been talking about. So again, from a short side, I was looking at that initial hit on the 5-day there, which gave a really nice move down, but then went back for more. I was looking for a swing fail of this orange level, and then the possibility of a move up into this 4-hour just above, and it didn't quite hit that 4 hours. Was that a few $100 off that 4-hour, and then has now had this move down. So if we do go again, as I've said, the short side, I'd look at this because the CME gap, I probably wouldn't look this high normally, but there is the possibility of a short squeeze if we come up through there. There is an untested hourly at the top, or if it takes out that high, you can look at that zone again. 61 fibs a lot lower, and the broken support is also lower, but again, just because of the possibility of stop hunting through those all these zones coming down here, I don't really want to look for more aggressive shorts on this. I would rather look for more aggressive shorts if we continue to consolidate through here, and if it gives me an 8 or 12-hour supply a bit later on today. And then, yeah, to the downside, the alert set for this 2-hour demand. If we come, we'll probably wick down a bit into that to actually close the gap, but that's where I've got the alert set for there now. And then, as I've said, for underneath this consolidation and all lower down there are kind of where the alerts are right now. If we do have a bigger pump, And again, just to update these zones, just above 1K there, sorry, 100K, 1K, 100K, there's a 2-day supply, and I can see I've got an orange line there, so I guess there's maybe some low time frame, there's a stop hunt that could happen there, and then, up. And again, we'll just look for, if we get this high in the zone, like I would expect us to be falling off pretty soon this week. Either, we could still come back a little bit higher. It could do that third. This is really only 2 hits to the high. Not sure I really, it's kind of arguably it's 3. I don't really count those as 2 separate ones. So maybe we'll get a third hit to the high, and a bit more of an aggressive move up. It's possible we get something like that first, or coming down into here like that first. But yeah, just trade what you see. At the moment, all those things are guessing. We're just sideways, and you can see we're on the edge of this trend line. Oh yeah, so on the long side, what I was saying is that I did initially I was just mulling this over the weekend because it's all for slow PA, so it was sort of worth watching. But there was a 12-hour demand, and then the 2-day, which I've now taken the colors out, but at that blue dash line, blue dotted line, and then the blue hard line there. So we did get, so the alert went for that, and it did get a little bounce, but it already made 4 hour supply, so then came down deeper. Then there was this little 2-hour here, actually, 4-hour there, and the 3-day below. So I said just watch around this area for them potential long entries, and that was more for weekend PA. During the week PA, you probably expect to take more stops and things like that. But yeah, so now we're into Monday, Tuesday. We're just consolidating around where I had this potential entry. On the data, there's not much more to say. Really, the ETF data. Let me see, I've got it open. Yeah, the ETF data. So we still have all those, but that selling going on or transfers going on Grayscale. I think it's probably confirmed as transfers now. And there's a huge amount of them. Like they keep coming through. So you can see this was from 12 hours ago, and hundreds of millions being transferred somewhere. And I did do a little bit of research to try and figure out where it was going or if anybody knew, and failed to come up with anything. The only thing I came up with was BitGet reported it, but again, just sent to multiple unknown addresses. And this is from a few days ago now, from the 2nd, and there's been more since then. And it's just saying, according to the Arkham monitoring data, which is basically what I was just looking at, Grayscale made another huge transfer. And yeah, so it continues to make these transfers, but nobody really knows where or why. Then I found another one from back in November, and this was on Binance. Grayscale transfers over 1,500 BTC to unknown addresses, and again, there was no outcome of this. And I looked back at the 20th of November, I think, on the chart, and it wasn't really anything that I could determine. So I think it would be. Yeah. So, from a higher time frame perspective, if you wanted to argue they were selling the top in some way or making some changes or transfers or whatever around the top, then from a high time frame perspective, then maybe that's correct. But it certainly didn't give any definitive, this is a top signal or bottom signal or anything like that. It's just in here. And then obviously it went higher and it went sideways for a good 3-4 months. So it's not necessarily a very useful indicator. On the normal ETF data, we basically had still some buying from BlackRock still going on the last few days. And this is more of a concern because we now still have continued buying from BlackRock, but we've started to get more selling in from everybody else. It wasn't very much yesterday, but there's still some there. So, and I do kind of recall that this happened at the last top. The BlackRock was still very heavily buying, but all the others had started to sell. So again, that's not the best indicator for bulls, I don't believe. So that's the ETFs. And then, I did have a look at some of the other data, but there really wasn't anything other than potentially things you could use low time frames on CVDs and things like that. There wasn't really anything that kind of popped out at me. Thankfully, Trading Light has returned, also semi-returned. So Trading Light has been down for 6 days, and everybody thought they'd exit scammed with our subscription money, which seems possibly not very worth it. But they seem to be back today, finally. You can see there's a little dot here from the last 4-hour candle has reappeared, but not in full. So Coinbase, I don't have the heat maps here. And so I've just got that one floating candle. I do have the heat maps on Binance, although they look a bit messy, and we've got a big gap in the data, obviously. But at least we have that. And again, nothing really to report on this. So, there's a wall at 100K and there's a wall at 110K. And then on the others that I look at, so Bitstamp has a wall at 105, 105, yeah, and the Binance FD pair has a not all at 105 as well, but whether these are particularly useful, I don't know. I did try another couple of sources, but they weren't. I don't really want to open them now just in case they freeze my computer. I tried to open them a bit earlier, but yeah, they weren't particularly useful, and they only gave me, I think, Binance and I think maybe Bybit, but they give you a lot of the perpetual walls, and I never really liked. To be honest, I haven't used the perpetual walls for a really long time. Um, but I remember back in the day, I used to try and use BitMEX when everybody was on BitMEX, and that was really the only one. That's why I said my information's a bit dated. But they weren't very useful because obviously futures walls or futures is used much more heavily for spoofing. Um, and getting people to jump in shorts and longs in front of them, etc., and then pulling out the walls and having them be fake. So, yeah, it was less reliable. Whereas spot walls also can be used for spoofing, but seem to be more reliable on, the price will end up heading to them, hitting to them, eating them, and then then you could actually physically watch them and physically watch the orders going through and the wall depleting to see whether the selling was dying off or the buying was dying off, depending on which direction you were in. So I've always preferred using the walls or the order books on spot, although I know a lot of other people do use the derivative ones too. Anyway, that's about it on Bitcoin. Don't think there's anything new to add. I've given you all the entries that I would consider and the confluence that I'd be looking for in those zones, and that's really about it. Let's quickly go on the total charts just to have another look at where they're at because I haven't looked for a couple of days. So total, not surprisingly, looked quite like Bitcoin. I just wanted to look at, so yeah, that has also, while it's still in the 3-day demand there, it's also similar to the career pair has flipped this 2-day supply. So again, while I never liked the top here particularly. Arguably it's taken out that high, but I would rather if this had been where Bitcoin is up a bit higher here. It has made a 2-day supply there. Nothing on the daily. So I mean, everything might make a daily supply today. And then again, I'd be more confident of looking for shorts with still with that nervousness of the gap being above. But yeah, total is now starting to look a bit weaker like everything else. All the other ones already looked weaker. So you can see here on total 2, we had a 2-day supply confirmed and has rejected already, and that's what we see on a lot of the majors. Well, they're not on Ether, but yeah, the majors got this similar type thing going on. And I commented on that in the group yesterday. I didn't get a chance to alert all of them. Actually, I know I learned it, unfortunately, the weaker ones, which actually haven't been tested, obviously. But I said, yeah, everything's made 2-day supply, so that's why I was kind of looking for that down move. And then also because most things have this decent gap from this 2-day to here. So all the majors are kind of looking in the similar structure to this pretty much. Not all of them, but most of them. But yeah, again, coming off that 2-day supply there, similar here. So this others now is obviously a little bit more like alts. So again, quite a lot has the 2-day supply. In this case, didn't get tested. And then below, I've commented on this structure before. Virtually everything has. So in this case, 4-day demand. In some cases, we've got weekly and 2-weekly in here. There's a clean 4-day demand in there. Then there's this 3-day, which obviously has a few candles until it broke out. Some of the alts are bouncing off the top of this 3-day, but not very many. And then there's a daily inside and there's daily down here. And a lot of the alts also haven't tested this daily down here. And in some cases, have other dailies that haven't been tested. So it's on a lot of alts, I've basically set alerts for here. But some are going to bounce higher. Like I say, some will hold up here and some have weeklies a little bit higher. Some may even like pick up these dailies that they've got throughout here, and then some are going to go lower and go through and go down to get these lower dailies. But for the most part, I'm just setting alerts here just to see what we're getting. And again, I've said to the group just to take them with a little bit of a grain of salt. They are certainly from what I've seen and the alerts that I've seen hitting so far, longs are still less reliable than shorts. So my bias still remains, if you see a pump on an alt, then into a zone, then look for shorts on it and look for shorts on the retest. Those are the ones for me anywhere, at least under my strategy, are they still working better than anything that's retesting down here. Some of the ones that are getting the higher retests, where I put in more aggressive ones, we're getting these moves up here, and in some cases new highs. But the ones I'm seeing that have already got down here in the last few days or even week, because they are doing their own thing very much, are still probably a bit 50-50. And, or, maybe they're coming into here, they're getting a bounce, going up to supply, getting another bounce. So, but they're certainly not getting, this move down into here and straight up to the moon again. So you certainly have time on the long side for those zones to hit. And or like I say, align with Bitcoin and with US dollar dominance and all that sort of stuff. But the majors, and you can see in the majors, which mostly look like this and aren't yet at these zones. Well, they're mixed. I'll go through them in a minute. But yeah, so the majors, until I see the confluence of all the majors being broadly down here, then I'll be more confident of those longs. And then similar here on total DeFi, we've also got that 2-day supply. That's the 3 down. This is a little bit higher, and there's still got some space for this 4-day, if it's going to hold. And I remain, again, just I should probably reiterate that because I haven't said that yet in this video, that I am still bear bias. I have always been conscious, like basically since back in, let's go on the others chart, but since back in, March, February, when we first hit here, I'm like, okay, we are in a big month. We have a 3-monthly demand, 2-monthly demand. Had a monthly inside it, lower down, has 2-week inside it, etc., etc. But you're still looking for longs, and I wasn't looking aggressively at all in this first bounce. I was looking a little bit more aggressively in this bounce, and I had some entries that then got taken out with the final drop, or may not be the final drop. But again, I've always said, you need to wait for it to break supply. So, we get a drop, we get an up move, it drops again, make a new supply. We come back, we test, in this case not close to the new supply, we drop again, we make a new supply. Similar here, we've come up, we've dropped again, and now we're back up, testing, in this case, new supply. So this is obviously one of the stronger bounces we've had. We've seen, some alts have come all the way back up here on this bounce. But at the moment, I don't know, it's probably actually clearer on the weekly chart, but this is our last drop. This has not broken that swing high. So it's possible we get an inverse head and shoulders here. But at the moment, until we see the bounces here and, see some structures actually do this, this is basically guessing. I also haven't looked at volume to know if this is a good head and shoulders or not. But, at the moment, that's a possibility. But equally, this is a possibility. So at this point, we are still guessing, looking for longs there in the same way as looking for longs here. It was guessing, and it didn't get very far. Some did. In fact, I take that back. We did get some good bounces here, depending on the structure, depending on the coin, and in many cases, depending on what's over to the left. So it is highly dependent on alts. Many alts, obviously, as you know, are at all-time lows. Some are in similar structures to this, where they're still essentially in an uptrend, or they're bouncing higher. Maybe they're around here, they've held bounces off the top of you. I haven't looked at H-bar for a while. That might be an interesting one to check actually on that, because that was obviously one of the strongest ones. Yeah. So anyway, my bias was down for the last 2 days because of this, and we've still got a little bit further to go to reach decent support. Yeah, and also you can just trade independently, just trade as you. I don't think they need to. Assuming you're just scalping, and you're not trying to hold for the ultimate in bull seasons. Then we're getting more of a drop now. Then you're still going to get scalps off many alts and in both directions. So I stand by that. What I've said previously, I still think both directions. And so yeah, what people say also, and that's something also I covered in the last stream actually, is on the long side. People get all upset if they miss this, that part of the move. But the problem is, when you have so many alts, and my issue is and has always been, is which alt is going to move. And sometimes I can see it, but I have 700 on my watch list. How am I ever going to know, when you've got every few days, I don't know how many a day, well, I would say probably 5 or 10 a day are getting massive green. When I go every day at the end of the day, I go onto my alt list, watch list, and I sort it, that's not my watch list, my full watch list, and I sort it by the change in price. found that, so you can see. So TradingView is very unreliable on the change in price, and I look at the top however many. And mainly also because I want to see, when, because then I can set the supply alerts if they've gone higher or if haven't hit supplies yet. I can be like, oh, well, spec, I haven't seen an alert go on that. Is that anywhere near supply? Similarly, I do the same at the bottom. I go, I sort in reverse order. That again hasn't sorted properly. Unless things just haven't dumped nicely. Sometimes it just doesn't sort. Got to sort it multiple times before it actually gets it into the right order. Really doesn't want to do it today. Okay, forget that for now. Let me just scroll down because eventually we'll get to, so for some reason it will sort all of them except some. So anyway, so at the moment we've got a 35% drop on layer, which is pretty huge for layer actually. So that's something. So I'll look at that and I'll be like, okay, layers dropped 35%. Like layer, obviously we all know we've been up only for the last few months. So I'll go and have a look at layer and see if it's made any supply for me to now look for a short entry and or if it's broken demand. I know my longs on that are really far away because I just don't trust that anymore. I know Party, is one I had a short entry go on yesterday, so I can see that's performing well. That's good. DRB, I had a long entry on yesterday, which did do well, and I think it's now retraced the whole thing. So yeah, by doing these sorts, I kind of know what the lists are looking like, and I can see. But yeah, so my point was when I go and look at those lists at the end of each day, I can see maybe 5 or 10 alts have moved significantly in the day, and then there's a whole bunch that will have done, between 0 and 5 to 10%, and then there'll be like 5 to 10 of them that have done, 10 to 1,000%. But I can't catch those. Like, I don't know which ones are going to move. The amount of entries I've given, I've been like, this looks good, and then it just doesn't move. If it's not ready, it's not ready. And and I don't know if it's pump groups that are driving the ones that, or whether it's whether there's some skill I missed, or whether like, people are just lucky. I've never quite figured that out. I suspect it's luck and or having large 10,000, 100,000 plus million followers that are pumping it for you, quite frankly. So for me, I've always much preferred looking for, okay, we're hitting supply, where are the short entries? Okay, now we've broken structure, we can do a short retest. And or then putting longs here for then if we come back, because then, maybe now we are making an uptrend. So what we've got here is, yes, while we still have that downtrend, and like I say, can still follow down here, what we do have within that is a sort of mini uptrend. So at the moment, what I'm saying is basically that this demand here isn't strong, but that doesn't mean it's not going to hold, much the same as here. So this was still even in a even smaller downtrend and came up and tested. This was slightly stronger demand because in this case, it had broken some local supply, but it's still under the major demand. So even this entry is a risk entry because we're still in a downtrend. Until we break that high, any demand entry in here is a risk entry. But obviously at some point we're going to reverse and we're going to start making an uptrend. So it is worth then looking for longs whilst being conscious you're still in the bigger downtrend. Anyway, that's more educational stuff and structural stuff than I expected. On Ether, so Ether similar, like the career pair was looking weaker as of yesterday. And obviously now the US dollar pair is looking weaker again. So I was hoping, I did have some hope for this because I thought the ETHBTC pair was looking interesting in the consolidation, but it's still very much struggling to break out. So Ether, I had an entry here. There was a 5-day and then weekly supply. So I had this possible entry there for looking for short. So obviously that's hit pretty nicely and has been now dropping down. I've kind of gone more again on the question mark front on this. I'm not sure why I put these as question marks rather than possible entries, but again, it was the exact same. So again, nothing changed on this. Like it's the exact same structure that I've talked about, that we actually see much more on Ether. Oops. I deleted that, but you basically get the general idea. Press the wrong mouse button. But yeah, these triangles with consolidations and breaking through are very, very common on Ether. So again, you can see we've got the same here, bounce, consolidation, and then in this case, did break the low. And similar here, and particularly on that first bounce. So first bounce, consolidation, didn't get much higher in this case, and then went all the way back through. In this case, did make a higher low. So again, and the difference with Ether is we are also on this 2-month major demand at the lows. We came through a 3 month. That's not great. We've made a new 3 month supply above, so I'm still overarchingly bearish on this from a very high time frame perspective. However, obviously, at some point we expect some retracement of this grind down that we've had for months. Um, so, but for now, again, much as I've just explained on all that structure on the others chart, again, we are still in a downtrend. Oops. We are still in a downtrend. We are still retesting supply in this downtrend. Obviously it can still go up to here, still have to break that high in order to then be in an uptrend, but at the moment still in a downtrend. And we are still then kind of going, okay, we've made new demand. Are we going to hold new demand to be able to get through this supply? But structurally on Ether, I'm more wary than on Bitcoin because yeah, I don't like that it kind of like left this sort of. I suppose it did take the stops here very slightly, so it's possible we get a bounce in this area. It is a weekly demand as well, so the only thing I would say actually against all those other examples I just gave, like here for example, is there was no weekly demand in there. And I can't remember. I think the other one was up top here. Yeah, there's no weekly demand in there, so there is there are differences. And a weekly demand, basically is saying it's had more consolidation. There's more people trapped in here who tried to short thinking this was going to go lower. There's more stop losses. There's liquidity in there. So it's possible that we get a bounce in that area. So, but again, similar to Bitcoin, these are sort of hoping, praying for the higher lows. And varying degrees of aggression. Ether, we do hope for the 61 fib though, because that is more common on Ether. So obviously the 61 is kind of between those two lower arrows. So we'll just have a see, assuming this is the top. And similarly on Ether from the low time frame perspective, yeah, we've got the CME close in here, and there's a 2 hour or 4 hour demand, something down here to watch for possible long entries in the first instance there. And secondly, we also left that CME gap above. So again, this is a gap all the way up the top of here. So again, there's a 30-minute supply just above. I kind of would have hoped for this to come up and fill that gap yesterday. So then structurally on this, yeah, so it made a weak 2-day demand. So again, I was looking for possibility of longs on this 2-day demand. We did get a few bounces yesterday, but obviously now it's still dropping deeper. The Korea pair, like I say, was weaker anyway. It hasn't created any new 2-day supply and is also still in its own dubious 2-day. And I think actually both had daily demand as well, a little bit lower. So they'd also both made this new daily demand, although again weak because unable to break the high. So yeah, just need to see a little bit more from those. And then yeah, CME gaps above and below. So really nothing different on structurally on Ether compared to Bitcoin. The BTC pair, it kind of made a 3-day demand by a hair there yesterday, but again, not really one I'd trade because it's too small. Did previously have a 2-day in here. So it came off that yesterday. So let's just go down to the lower time frame so you can see, if you can see through my colors. So there is a wick here. So it did come back down into that 2-day demand yesterday and bounced off it. But again, it's still struggling to get through. It's got 5-day supply and then a daily above it and just hasn't been able to get through supply. And obviously now so we need to see if we're going to get a big buyback on this. But, I was hoping over the weekend, this was looking like, it was kind of making a low time frame, sort of bull flag consolidation in here. Sort of like that. But then if that's going to work, then you want to see a significant breakout. And obviously, it hasn't given it. It's been unable to get past supply. Now has a new 8-hour supply in there. So, I mean, you can keep an eye on that. As I've said many times, we're in yet another zone of interest at the lows. We are super conscious that Ether likes to be in zones of interest and then really do nothing before dumping more. But we are now back down like really right at the start of the impulse, and Ether dominance has in fact, I think, taken out this low now. Has in fact, yes, it has. The risk here is that now we're just not, if it can't garner any sort of, even if it got a bounce off here up to somewhere and then dropped for a next wave, like again, I'm still probably more bearish on this for it to go lower, but like at some point you would expect it to give some sort of a retracement, and because this has just been a slow grind down for the better part of pushing 3 years, or 2.5 years, without any sort of retracement at all. Even back here, I had a few 6 months or so of pulling back. This has had, had some at the top, but then only 1 month of green for the last, since June 2024. 2024. So yeah. Anyway, I was cautiously optimistic, but then, it's sort of slowly it's taking that optimism away on Ether. From the low time frame perspective, yeah, again, there's nothing new. This chart's significantly messy. I think I was trying to draw channels and things on this. I might take that off now because with the wicks, it's not great anyway. Yeah, there's that CME gap there. So yes, I've alerted that. If it does send a wick back up there to test it. I had obviously that entry there on the 5-day supply, and I set another alert for here, and I said, you can look for if this, sorry, yeah, 5-day, but also 12-hour supply in there. I said you can look and see if that 12-hour gets hit. If we come up again, we're looking for a swing fail of in fact, the previous highs, and or a wick potentially higher. So similar to Bitcoin, there was a 2-hour untested a little bit higher here, and there was a CME gap above. I think that CME gap might have closed. Let me just check. Yeah, so sorry, I can delete that now. So you can see the CME gap from here previously, so that has closed. So yeah, that was the other thing I was looking for from a confluence perspective for the shorts, and why my short here was slightly lower than the weekly, um, because of that CME gap which has closed. So here we can delete that. Yeah, so again, not much more to add on that. I don't really want to trade in this range. We've got a possible stop and squeeze that could happen above if it does want to go up, but there's nothing really telling me that it's going to go up right now. But yeah, so that was the alert. So I had this alert here for this daily demand, um, just in there at that arrow, and yeah, I got bit of a wick through, and then a few decent bounces off that yesterday. But again, it's just getting battered back down by this 8 and 12-hour supply above. Um, so yeah, there's not much more to add on that. On the long side entries that I just talked about, so that 4-hour demand there, and then this more risky if we start like really barreling down here weekly and then hourly, and then it's just messy below. So probably wouldn't be life catching anything down there anyway, and just wait and see what happens. Yeah, so that's Bitcoin and Ether. That's 40 minutes. Maybe I'll do the majors quickly, and then I'll do a separate video on the alts and upload that a bit later. Yeah, because I haven't really, there were a few new entries I put on the majors. So just to kind of update what's happening with those. So EOS obviously decided to be, trying to think, I think I did the stream about a week ago. So be somewhere in here. So EOS obviously was trying to be stronger. I didn't really want to short anything here, so I've still got this short back up on this 4-hour, 2-hour supply at the top here from previously. I did throw in yesterday an aggressive long on 2-day, 3-day demand in here, just purely because at that point, or not yesterday, sorry, the weekend, because at that point Bitcoin also had the 2-day, 3-day. But I did put in the alert in the comment. I was put, I'm cautious. I put like I'm, yeah. I said if I said something like it feels scary or it feels dangerous. That was what it was. But it did get a decent bounce up, but again, just straight back up into supply. So this is kind of what I mean, that you're looking for. You can get these entries, but yeah, we're just not really in a market where you're going to hold. I mean, you can see this very much on EOS. It's just been grinding up. That yes, if you were lucky to buy the bottom, I did have like entries and alerts I was looking at down here at the time. But it's been, so what was that, 16th of April, so we're now 3 weeks away, and it's just been this slow grind up and hasn't really got very far, depending on what your risk to reward is. If you'd had a tight stop, maybe that would have made a decent trade if you'd held until now, but it's, becomes very high risk when it's testing every zone like this. And obviously it's EOS, so EOS, my higher time frame bias is still down, but I thought it was kind of worth looking at the possibility of an aggressive long here, even if it was going to get a bounce up to there, or to take out some more of these highs from previously, these zones that haven't been hit before, if the market is going to be stronger for a while. So now we're very much in a ranging market. It's kind of hard to know if it's going to be up or down, and hence trade in both directions. So yeah, that's EOS, and then yeah, like I think I said previously, I didn't really want to long. I like long the most aggressive one, on a zone that hasn't been tested at the top. All these other zones have been tested, so it would be down here. I haven't got that alert set at the moment, but it'll be down there where I'd look for a new entry if the price does start, to fall. Litecoin, I think yeah, I would have shown you that you would have got that weekly alert for a short entry in that last stream. And again, this had a decent bounce yesterday, but then just got, and actually did get through a 12-hour supply that was a local, but it ended up just being a stop pump before dropping back through. So again, I haven't changed anything on that. Like it's choppy like EOS, but it does have a weekly demand in here. So again, I thought it was worth watching to see if that weekly holds on a retest. And the other issue is with all the majors I have actually is all the VC pairs look hideous. Um, so maybe I'll run through that very, very quickly at the end. So like again, none of those really support me looking for longs on I think pretty much anything. Um, I'm trying to remember if any of them, like all of them, I think I could go a bit lower on. So sure, if Bitcoin then bounces significantly, then that can still be okay. The US dollar pairs can still do okay, but um, mm, um, it doesn't make you really want to long these US dollar pairs in isolation. So anyway, so Ripple, so I had the alert here from previously 5-day weekly demand, so it got a decent bounce off there, at least for a scalp, but now it's come back down. I reset the alert because it hadn't quite hit the weekly zone, and it obviously then did hit that yesterday, and it's bounced up, and actually I think it didn't bounce so it bounced just back up into 8-hour supply there, and has now come back down deeper. So this again is just a more challenging one. We're in weekly supply, and we're just hitting this kind of fairly poor weekly demand, so we'll see. Um, what we get if we get a decent bounce off here, but it's a fairly risky, kind of aggressive area to long, particularly on a second test. But yeah, I haven't had anything new other than that. And then the next zone I'll be interested in is kind of all the way down there if we get a bigger drop. BCH. BCH I wanted to be more bullish on, but again, the structure is just a little bit awkward. So this did make 4-hour demand, but then unfortunately it wasn't a strong one and it came back and tested it really quickly. It looked like it might flip it to supply for a moment, but then didn't. Also had a 3-day inside it. So I think I keep saying 4 hour. I meant 4-day demand. Got a 3-day inside it, and it's also got this weekly, but the weekly got tested already locally. So anyway, I put an alert for 3-day demand in here. Unfortunately, in the meantime, it's made daily supply, so it's probably gonna need some more time to think about it now. So just check who's messaging me. Okay. Yeah, so it's going to need a bit more time to think about it. Yeah, and I would look again fairly decent distances away for possible longs and shorts on this now. Like if this fails, unless we get something developed from this. And then that was it. So yeah, that's the old majors US dollar pairs, and then just a quick run through of the BTC pairs, just so you can see these are just higher time frames. So EOS, BTC coming off 3 month supply. So again, I'd be short biased on this for a lower low. Obviously, the bigger picture is just down, with mini bounces, every 6 months or so, but they will tend to die eventually. Come off 3 month supply, I can't be bullish on this unless I see 3 month supply broken. Made a new weekly supply. It does have a 2-week demand below, so maybe this will pick up. It's up to you if you want to be trading EOS, and again, it's got that sort of difficulties of zones within that. Has actually made a 3-day demand in there. So I guess we can see a little bit more from EOS, but overarchingly, coming off the 3 month supply, I'll show you the 3 month chart. It's got a wick up into it, but it's coming off 3 month supply, then I'm not overly bullish on this. Litecoin, again, 2 month supply above, 3 month supply above, local, weekly, and I actually didn't quite make the weekly there, to be fair. But also it does have a 5-day supply, so I think I drew it. Took a wick up inside it yesterday, but now is dropping off again. Yes, it's a mild possibility it's going to make a double bottom, but it's already wicked once off the low here for a swing fail of the high. So again, my bias on this remains down. I mean, again, in its favour, maybe it's approaching what you can call dubious support, but so much supply above. And Ripple, Bitcoin, again, wanted to be bullish on this because it's on a yearly demand here. Had that wick off yearly demand, but we really need to see just another test on this yearly. Just drifting back into it, and it's just making increasingly more supply above. It's choppy and messy, so if it wants, like at least it's a slow grind down, but then so was that. Um, so I guess we'll see. But this could probably still have a lot more retracement here, even if it comes down and bounces off this daily. But initially, at least I would want to see a retest on that yearly level there. And then finally, BCH. This was one I kind of had like maybe slightly more hope for, but not really that much hope. So this actually had made a weekly, but it's gone so deep into that, it's not really worth having it. Um, it's got 6 months supply and yearly supply up here. It's possible, obviously it's swing failed the low and it's come back into range. So, maybe this can move up, but it's already had a big move up. It's rejected weekly supply. It's coming back for the test. So really it's just kind of a triangle. So and it did make a 2 week demand there again, just by a hair, but it's come back so far deep into it. But I think at least on this, the only thing I will say in this is favor that this is why I did put that long entry, the aggressive long entry on the US dollar pair, because I kind of thought, maybe that's one of the few that's going to have a little bit of hope. Anyway, onward. BNB, I did add an entry here for a long on this daily demand. I just thought the timing was decent. So again, decent bounce off that, but straight up into 2 day supply. So I think virtually, like I said before, virtually all the majors have this 2 day supply. Some tested yesterday. BNB's just come up today. So obviously a nice long there. I haven't put shorts on the 2 days on any of this layout. So as you know, like this is the layout that I tend to be more bullish on. That's just kind of worked out that way. But BNB, Link, ADA, and Dogecoin, and mainly because ADA has 6 months demand, BNB, Link, and Doggy all have yearly. Link's a bit deeper in the yearly, but is in a 6 month inside, and then Doggy's just tested this yearly. So I don't want to put aggressive shorts particularly on these. I'll put them on the major zones that haven't been tested from the last down move, but I don't really want to be aggressively shorting when we might be creating that uptrend that I talked about earlier. So Link actually made a 2 week things around, made a 2 week demand in here, and it is just testing that now. But again, my alert was a bit lower on that 4 day inside. The short that I had of the daily supply that I talked about previously has worked quite nicely. Similarly, has this 2 day. It made a 2 day supply. It rejected it. Made another 2 day supply. The wick yesterday didn't quite get up into that zone, but coming back down deeper. But yeah, again, I was just slightly more conservative on the long entry on this. Just because, again, you want to kind of broadly align if you can with 61 fib, and in fact, that's probably still too aggressive even for the 61. It's much lower. But when things are immediately coming off supply, I want to assume they'll kind of at least go deeper into demand, or possibly, maybe break some demand. And again, I remain with the same previous structure that I've talked about, that this is still in a downtrend. Could still go and break out this low. So that's Link. And next short entry is a lot higher up at the top of the screen if it gets there. Dogecoin, again, made a new weekly demand. It's got a 4 day and a daily inside it, so it could dip lower. And again, the 61 is a lot lower, and an untested 12-hour down there. So yeah, these are just sort of low time frame entries I'm looking at if we get them. Didn't have a short entry on this. Did make a 2 day supply and rejected off it, so probably I should have done, but it's hard at the start of the week. ADA, very similar, made a 2 day supply, rejected off it, coming back down. The next alert is for this. So there's a weekly demand, again, has a 4 day and a daily inside it. So all of these we're really looking for what kind of bounce we're going to get off these zones as and when they hit. We had a nice bounce off BNB. The timing was good with yesterday's bounce. And it has held, surprisingly. Actually, I thought it might get battered back down, but apparently not. So that's those. BTC pairs, again, just very quickly. Find my list. Can be very quick if I can find my list. BNB BTC. So yeah, I've said previously I flipped to bearish on this because I noticed, which I hadn't checked it for a while, it made a 3 month supply and is rejected off it here. It's also made a monthly just above now. So while we can get a test up into here, and that might make the US dollar pair have a decent move up, I still expect this to get down here at some stage. And maybe it'll come up and before dropping, but we'll see. Some cough now. Ada. My protein shake's getting all lumpy because I haven't been drinking it while I was talking to you. So Ada, yeah, similarly. So Ada, I was very bullish when we hit the lows. It was one of the ones I said was going to be strong, and then we did get that decent up move, and we got a decent move off the retest. However, again, now made a monthly supply and rejected off it. So A to BTC not looking great. US dollar pair. What's it going to do in contrast to that? It's going to need BTC itself to do a very big up move in order to support the US dollar pair going up, and they're still potentially dropping further. Um, so, again, like I probably would have liked this a little bit more if we managed to see some continuation. It still could have the continuation, but when it's made a monthly supply like that and just come off it again, like I'm still expecting at least to get back down here. Hopefully not to break, these wicks, but that's also a possibility. But yeah, with the immediate monthly supply, that's not looking great. Link exactly the same. So link for ages, I've said I wanted it to get down to this zone. I have an alert set there. Wow, this cough. Thank God I said I'd stop after this. It's got a 3-month supply above. 2-week, various weekly supplies in there. So again, it's not looking promising. At least get down into here, and or God knows where if it wants to dip down into that level or into these zones. So that's Link, and then finally Doggy. Not dissimilar to Link. Well, it's slightly better than Link. It is coming down to this zone which hasn't been tested. It's been tested on the March candle. A lot of weekly supply above, but no monthly supply on this. So this just really needs to hold a higher low, because if it doesn't, again, bigger drop coming in. But Doggy, there is potential for this if it can hold here, but we still need to see some structure that's hopefully not a green candle like that we completely miss. But hopefully gives something, some at least consolidation for us to get a long entries in here. Would be virtually impossible to get in except on a very low time frame and broadly guessing. So yeah, still not looking great here, and still decent amounts of supply above. Yeah, so that's it on the first set of new majors, and the second set of new majors. So on Atom, Dot, and Near, on the 2-day supplies, I placed alerts on all 3 of those, none of which got tested. So Sol did. Actually, Sol was the only one that I like the BTC pair, and also the Grayscale Sol pair I liked. So this is kind of interesting. So I want to keep an eye on Sol. But yeah, on these, so I set all those alerts for 2 days, so they'll all potentially still go if we do get some sort of bounce today. All of them have this like 4-day, 5-day, 3-day structure that I've talked about in here. Dot, I just don't like where the low is, so I'm not going for a higher low on Dot. But then obviously if everything's going to bounce on this higher low, then maybe the Dot will get a bounce in here as well. So I guess we'll see. Near is basically the same. Near I do like where the low is, so at least this is on 3 months demand. Doesn't mean it's not going to go deeper into the 3-month. So there are plenty of zones further down here and all the way down at the bottom if it wants to retrace more of this wave up. But due to 3-month demand, this is more worth looking for a higher low. It's got a bit of space to get down there. Again, it's got a daily above that, so we'll see. Atom, you'll remember that is always all over the place for me, but I did flip to short bias on this when it made 3-month supply and rejected in here. So then I was looking for entries on this weekly supply that was made. It did go a bit higher inside it, but has held it. But again, I'm more comfortable looking for short entries on Atom. Although it's just been annoying me in this consolidation. I've been a bit too aggressive with some of the entries on that. And again, so what you can see at least on this, although the structure is different, is this is coming back down through this local. So it had 3-day demand here, and it's come very, very deep inside it now. So obviously the right move not to look for longs on for a higher low on. Well, I mean, it still could just hold higher low, but for a higher low on this, and then potentially looking for significantly lower on that. And then finally, Sol. So yeah, Sol again, it's coming off 3 months supply, so it's very, very hard for me to be, let's long this. So I had this alert here for possible swing fail of this level. In fact, swing failed the next one up, the next wick higher. And it's coming back down now. It does have a weekly demand and a 3-day in here. I did want them to hit a lot earlier, like really before this bigger up move. But again, so that's the only one that I've kind of been a little bit more aggressive on. But even then, it's challenging because Yes, we've got 3-day and weekly here, but you can see there's a very clean, untested daily there, and there's a very neat another clean, untested daily at the bottom. Um, so obviously be careful, don't go into this blindly if you're going in, because that would be an aggressive long entry. And obviously it's come off that 2-day supply. This short, I think I added when I thought we might like push up here a little bit higher. It's not the nicest zone at the week. It's a weekly, and then there's another monthly untested higher. So I guess we'll see again. Um, on the BTC pairs, so Sol. Um, Actually, no, it wasn't Sol BTC. I didn't like this particularly. So yeah, again, I don't really like where the low is on this, and like, yeah, I've said this also resembles Ether far too much, and the possibility of it coming all the way back down here is too high. I think on Sol. I think it was that Grayscale pair that I found more interesting. Um, it had kind of flipped a weekly there, but again, not strongly. So but again, I mean, at the Sol, at least Sol BTC, at least we've got a daily demand down here. So, and it's not coming off as significant supply as some of the other majors. So, while I don't love this as a structure, it certainly could give inverse head and shoulders type pattern. Bounce in here for a move even up to the higher zone before rejecting. And I don't want to get too caught up in it. It must look like Ether. And Ether didn't give it because Ether actually at this point in time, like I've just said, did give a kind of a decent sideways move before it went down forever. Um, so, even if Sol does decide to mimic that, it could have some sideways first. And then quickly just on the other BTC pairs, dot, ugly, 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 ugly. Come off 2 month supply, dropping down, made a weekly supply, so that's a hard no for me. Atom, the same. It's still got to break the wick to make a lower low, but again, just lots of 5-day, 4-day supplies above and a weekly in there. So again, why would you long this? Sol atom near, I think it's basically the same. So while near looks okay on the US dollar pair with the 3 month demand, again, it came up, it had made an annual supply, came up, tested it, and has now just dropped off there. It's got 3 month supply and 2 month supply there. So it had a 2 month level there of supply, and it basically just wicked off that and dropped down. So again, nothing you really want to look for longs on this unless you're just plain guessing. And Sol BTC I just showed you. So that's just over an hour. So that's basically covering BTC, Ether, all the others and crypto market cap charts, and then the majors, old majors and the new majors. So I hope that is useful. I will 6:30 now, so maybe I'll have dinner and maybe I'll come back and do another stream later. At least I can upload this, and then I can do another stream on the alts on the watch list a little bit later. Okay, so yeah, if you watch this before I get back later, feel free to put any requests in the channel of any alts you want charted, and yeah, let me know if there's any feedback of this, and please like and subscribe if you're interested and want to see more content. Thank you. Have a good evening.